The morning I came home from my fishing trip up at Lake Tahoe, I expected to smell coffee and maybe hear the news playing low from the kitchen. Instead, I walked through my own front door and found my bedroom completely rearranged. Not redecorated, rearranged. My dresser, the oak one I'd had since before my son was born, was pushed against the wall at a different angle. My reading chair was gone. The quilt my late wife had made the winter before she passed, the one with the green and yellow squares that took her 3 months to finish, was folded up in a basket by the door like it was a piece of clutter someone meant to donate. I stood there for a moment, just stood there in the doorway of my own bedroom, holding my tackle box, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "Do you like it, Dad?" My son's wife was standing in the hallway behind me. Her name is Renee. No, wait. Her name is Gwen. And I want to be precise about things, because everything that happened over the next several weeks just came down to details, and if I've learned anything in 63 years of living, it's that the devil lives in the small print. Gwen was smiling in the way she always smiled when she wanted something, wide enough to be pleasant, not wide enough to reach her eyes. "Your things are in the guest room," she said. "We moved them while you were gone. More space in there than we thought." I turned around slowly. "My things, your clothes, your books. The important stuff." She tilted her head. "We need the master because of the bathroom, the ensuite. It just makes more sense for us." My son appeared at the end of the hallway. He was looking at the wall, somewhere between the two of us. "Wes," I said. "His name is Wesley. He was born in the same house he now lived in. My house, the house I built with overtime pay and savings, and one refinance I swore I'd never do again. Did you know about this?" He finally looked at me. Gwen thought it would be a better setup. That was his answer. Gwen thought. I didn't say anything more that evening. I went to the guest room, which had been my home office before they moved in, and I sat on the edge of the pull-out couch. They'd removed the desk and replaced it with a pull-out couch. And I looked at my tackle box sitting there on the floor, and I thought about Joan. That was my wife. Joan passed 4 years ago from a cancer that moved faster than anyone expected, and the house still had her in it, in the small ways. The recipe cards in the kitchen drawer, the lavender sachets in the linen closet, the quilt she'd made folded up now in a basket like it was ready for goodwill. I didn't sleep well that night. Let me back up and explain how we got here, because the bedroom wasn't the beginning. It was only the most visible moment in a long slide that had been going on for almost a year. After Joan died, the house was too quiet. I won't pretend otherwise. 3 bedrooms, a den, a 2-car garage, and silence in every corner. My daughter, who lives in Denver, called me every Sunday and worried out loud. My son, who lived 40 minutes away in a rental in Sacramento, suggested he and Gwen move in to help out. "Just for a while," he said. "Just to make sure Dad isn't rattling around alone." I said yes. Looking back, I understand exactly what I missed. That the offer had been Wes's idea, but the plan had been Gwen's. They moved in the following spring. At first it was fine. Gwen cooked sometimes. Wes helped me with the gutters and the sprinkler system, which had been giving me trouble. We had dinners together at the table, and it almost felt like a household again, instead of a monument to absence. Then things began to shift in small ways. The thermostat got moved to a setting I found cold. The television in the living room started defaulting to streaming services I didn't subscribe to. My mail, my actual postal mail, started appearing in a pile on the kitchen counter instead of on the entryway table where I'd kept it for 30 years. Small things. The kind of things you mention once and then let go because you don't want to be the old man who complains about the thermostat. I mentioned the mail pile once. Gwen said the entryway table was cluttered and she'd moved some things around. I let it go. Then the garage became an issue. I have a woodworking setup in the garage, a table saw, a router, cabinets I've built out over 20 years. My father taught me woodworking and I taught Wes, and it's the one hobby I kept after retirement. Gwen's car didn't fit in the garage alongside my truck and my equipment, so she started parking in the driveway. Then she suggested, she said, not demanded, that I move some of my equipment into the backyard shed. The backyard shed is where I keep lawn tools. It is not climate controlled. A table saw does not belong in a backyard shed. I didn't move the equipment. She didn't bring it up again directly. But I noticed things started disappearing from the garage. Small things. A shelf here, a storage bin there. And appearing elsewhere or not at all. Then I came home from Lake Tahoe and my bedroom was gone. The morning after I found the pull-out couch, I went for a walk. I do this most mornings, 3 miles around the neighborhood, Same route I've walked since I retired from the fire department 11 years ago. Captain for the last 6 of those years, which means I spent a long time learning when a situation was about to escalate, and when it could still be managed. This one, I decided, could still be managed. I came home, made coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. Gwen came in around 9 in a robe, surprised to see me there. "You're up early," she said. "I'm always up early," I said. "Gwen, I want to talk about the bedroom." She poured herself coffee and sat across from me with the kind of posture that tells you a person has already rehearsed what they're about to say. "We should have mentioned it before you left," she said. "But it happened kind of organically. We realized while you were gone that the guest room is actually very comfortable, and the master really works better for us long term." "Long term," I repeated. "We're thinking of starting a family." She looked at me steadily. "We'll need space. The guest room for you, and eventually the 3rd bedroom for the baby." I looked at her for a moment. "This is my house," I said. "Of course," she said quickly. "Of course it is. We're so grateful you've let us stay. I want my bedroom back by the end of the week." She smiled in that way again. "Dad, let's not make this uncomfortable. We've all settled in. Change is hard, but—" "It's not hard," I said. "It's not hard at all. This is my house. My bedroom is the master bedroom. I'd like it back by Friday." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Wes." Wes came to find me in the backyard that afternoon while I was pulling weeds from Joan's rose beds. "She's really upset," he said. "I kept pulling weeds." "She moved my bed, Wes." She was trying to think ahead. "For the baby? You're not having a baby yet, and when you do, we'll talk about it then like adults. Right now, I want my bedroom back." He stood behind me for a moment. Then he said something that I still think about, months later, because it told me everything I needed to know about where we'd arrived. He said, "Maybe it would help if you thought of it as our house." I sat back on my heels and looked up at him. "Your mother and I built this house," I said. "I worked 26 years in the fire service to pay for it. It is my house. It will be your house when I'm gone if I decide to leave it to you. But that's not today." He went inside without saying anything more. They did not move my things back by Friday. I'll tell you what I did next, and I want to be clear that it took me the better part of 2 weeks to decide on it, because I'm not a man who acts in anger when I can act in clarity. I called my attorney. His name is Roy, and he's been handling my affairs since before Joan got sick. Property matters, the trust we set up, all of it. I explained the situation. Roy listened without interrupting, which is what he does, and then he said, "Okay, first things first. Let's look at what's in writing." What was in writing was nothing. When Wes and Gwen moved in, there was no lease agreement, no formal arrangement, nothing that established any tenancy or financial contribution. Roy said that was both the problem and the solution. "Without a formal agreement, they're guests," he said. "In California, guests who've been there long enough can claim certain rights, so we do need to move relatively promptly. But the house is yours, the deed is yours, and there's nothing to negotiate. What do I need to do? First, a written notice. A formal notice to vacate, I'll draft it. Gives them 30 days. I sat with that for a moment. 30 days. Wes had lived 40 minutes away his whole adult life. I wasn't putting him in the street. He had options, he had income, he had the rental they'd left that might still be available. But 30 days was 30 days, and I thought about Joan's quilt in that basket, and I said, "Draft it." Before the notice went out, something else happened, something I hadn't expected, and that changed the nature of what I was dealing with. I was in the den one evening, looking for a file folder I kept on the bottom shelf of the bookcase. I'd had it for years. It was where I kept certain financial documents, a copy of the deed, some records relating to the house. It wasn't a secret. It was just a file folder on a shelf. It was gone. I looked for it methodically, the way I used to search a structure, systematically, without panic. I checked every shelf, every drawer in the den, the filing cabinet in the closet. The folder was not in the house. Or, if it was, it had been moved somewhere I couldn't find it. Now this could have been nothing. Papers get moved when people live together. I understand that. But a few days later, I got a piece of mail from the county assessor's office, a routine notice about property tax records. I almost didn't open it carefully, but something made me stop. The notice referenced a change request, a request to update the mailing address on file for the property. My address, my house. Someone had submitted a form requesting that all future correspondence be redirected to a P.O. box I did not recognize. I called Roy that same afternoon. "Don't touch anything," he said. "Don't say anything to them. Come in tomorrow morning." I went in the next morning. Roy had already contacted the county and flagged the address change as potentially unauthorized. He was thorough. I've always appreciated that about him. He also started looking into whether any other paperwork had been filed. What he found was limited but concerning. The address change was real. Someone had submitted it, and the form required information about the property that wasn't publicly available in that level of detail. It hadn't progressed to anything damaging yet, but Roy described it as a probing action, someone testing what they could access, what they could redirect, what they could start to quietly move. This isn't just a family disagreement about a bedroom, Roy said. No, I said. I didn't think it was. The 30-day notice went out by certified mail and hand delivery on a Tuesday. Gwen signed for it. I watched her read it from across the living room. Her face went through several things: surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like the expression you make when a bluff gets called. Wes came to me an hour later. He was calmer than I expected. Dad, he said, this is serious. I know it is. You're actually doing this. I am. He sat down. For a long moment he didn't say anything, and I looked at my son who I'd taken to ball games and taught to drive and walk through woodworking projects in this very garage, and I felt the specific grief of that, the grief of watching a person you love become someone you don't fully recognize. Gwen has been under a lot of pressure, he said finally. I know she has, I said, but that pressure didn't authorize what she did. What exactly do you think she did, Dad? I think she submitted a form to redirect mail from my property to an address I don't know. I think she took a file folder with records in it. I think she moved into my bedroom and had every intention of staying. I paused. I think she was planning ahead, and I think she planned further ahead than just guest bedrooms and babies. Wes was quiet for a long time. I didn't know about the mail thing, he said. I looked at him. I knew about the bedroom, he said. I agreed with the bedroom. But I didn't know about the other things. I believed him. I want to say that plainly. I believe my son did not know about the mail redirect. I think he was complicit in the softer forms of the takeover, without understanding where they were leading. That's not exoneration, but it's the truth as I understand it. Then you have some thinking to do, I said, about a lot of things. They were out in 26 days. Gwen moved efficiently. She packed their things with a speed that suggested she'd been prepared for this possibility. Wes moved slower, stopping to look at things, picking up objects and setting them back down. On their last morning, he found me in the garage at the workbench and stood in the doorway for a while without saying anything. I'm sorry, he said, eventually. I know you are. I didn't handle it right. No, I said. You didn't. He left after that. I heard Gwen's car back down the driveway, and I stood at the workbench, and I sanded a piece of oak I'd been working on, and I let myself feel the full weight of it, the loss and the relief and the anger and the love, all of it at the same time, which is usually how things feel when they matter. That evening I moved my dresser back to where it belonged. I put Joan's quilt on the bed. I sat in my reading chair, which had been in the hallway closet, of all places, and I looked at the room that was mine again, and I breathed in the quiet. Roy followed up with the county on the mailing address issue. The unauthorized change was reversed. No further forms had been filed. Whatever Gwen had been building toward, it hadn't gotten far enough to cause real damage, and we intended to keep it that way. Roy drafted a letter that I chose not to send, a warning that any further action relating to the property would result in legal consequences. I kept it in case I ever needed it. I also changed the locks. A neighbor recommended a good locksmith, and I had all 3 exterior locks replaced on the same afternoon Wes and Gwen left. It wasn't dramatic, it was just practical. Something I should have done years ago, not because of my son or even his wife, but because Joan and I had put off too many practical things for too long, and I'd learned the cost of that. The guest room is a home office again. The desk is back, the bookshelves are reorganized, and I've started a new woodworking project. A blanket chest, the kind Joan always wanted. The oak is good, straight grain. It'll take me most of the winter to do it right. My daughter calls from Denver every Sunday. She knows the broad outlines of what happened, and she's furious in the way daughters get furious. Thoroughly and with great loyalty. I've told her the important part. I handled it. I'm fine. The house is mine. Wes and I talk on the phone sometimes. It's careful still. The kind of conversation where you choose your words and leave space for the other person to choose theirs. He's back in Sacramento, a different rental this time. He and Gwen are still together, which is his decision to make. He calls on my birthday and on the holidays, and I think in time we'll find our way back to something more normal. Or we won't. I've learned that some damage is repairable and some isn't, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise. What I know is this: I built this house. I paid for this house. I raised my family in this house, and I buried my wife while living in it, and I intend to die here myself when my time comes, in the bedroom with the oak dresser and the quilt with the green and yellow squares. Nobody gets to walk through your door and start rearranging what you've built. Not a stranger, not a neighbor, not someone who married into your family and decided that your age meant your grip on things was loosening. My grip is fine. I went back up to Lake Tahoe in the fall. Same spot, same camp chair at the water's edge, same thermos of coffee. I sat there in the early morning when the light was still flat, and the lake was perfectly still, and I thought about Joan, and I thought about Wes, and I thought about all the years of work that had become walls and floors and a roof. Then I cast my line out into the water, and I let the quiet do what quiet does. I drove home the next afternoon and walked through my own front door, and it smelled like wood shavings and lavender sachets and old oak, and everything was exactly where I had left it. That's what a home feels like when it's yours.